This is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Part 2. I see you feel as I do, said Mr. Enfield. Yes, it's bad. Yes, it's a bad story for the man. For my man was a fellow that nobody could have had to do with. A real damnable man, and that person that drew the cheque is the very pink of properties. Celebrated too, and what makes it worse, one of your fellows who do what they call good. Blackmail, I suppose, an honest man praying through the nose for some of the cappers of his youth. Blackmail House is what I call the place, with the door in consequence, though even that, you know, it's far from explaining all, he added, and with the words fell into vein of musing. From this he recalled Mr. Utterson asking rather suddenly, "And you don't know if the drawer of the cheque lives there?" "A likely place, isn't it?" returned Mr. Enfield. "But I happen to have noticed his address. He lives in some square or other." "And you never asked about the place, what with the door?" said Mr. Utterson. "No, sir, I have delicacy," was the reply. I feel very strongly about putting questions in partakes too much of the style of the day of judgment. You start a question and it's like starting a stone. You sit quietly at the top of the hill and away the stone goes, starting others, and presently some bland old bird. The last you wouldn't have thought of, it is knocked. The last you would have thought of is knocked on the head in its own back garden, and the family have to change their name. No, sir, I make it a rule of mine. The more it looks the queer street, the less I ask. A very good rule too, said the lawyer. But I have studied the place for myself, continued Mr. Enfield. It seems scarcely a house. There is no other door, and nobody goes in and out of that one. But once in a great while, the gentleman of my adventure, there are three windows looking on the court on the first floor. None below. The windows are always shut, but they're clean. And then there is a chimney, which is generally smoking, or somebody must live there, and yet it's not so sure, for the buildings are so packed all together about the court, and that it's hard to say where one ends and another begins. The pair walked on again for a while in silence, and then, Enfield, said Mr. Utterson, there's a good rule of yours. Yes, I think it is, returned Enfield. But for all that, continued the lawyer, there's one point I want to ask. I want to ask the name of the man who walked over the child. Well, said Mr. Enfield, I can't see what harm it would do. It was a man of the name of Hyde. Said Mr. Stephenson. What sort of man is he, to see? He's not easy to describe. There is something wrong with his appearance, something displeasing, something downright detestable. I never saw a man I do disliked, and yet I scarce know why. He must be deformed somewhere. He gives a strong feeling of deformity. Although I could specify the point, he's an extraordinary looking man, and yet I recall I can name nothing out of the way. No, sir, I can make no hand of it. I can't describe him, and it's not want of memory, for I declare I see him this moment. Mr. Utterson again walked some way in silence, and obviously under a weight of consideration. You are sure he used to use the key? He inquired at last. Yes, my dear sir, began Mr. Enfield, surprised out of himself. Yes, I know, said Utterson. I know that it must seem strange. The fact is, if I do ask, The fact is, if I do not ask the same of the other party, it is because I know already. You see, Richard, your tale has gone home. If you've been exact in any point, if you had been inexact at any point, you had better correct it. I think you might have warned me, returned the other, with a touch of sullenness. But I have been pedantically exact in all, as you call it. But I have been pedantically exact, as you call it. The fellow had a key, and what's more, he has it still. I saw him use it not a week ago. Miss Hudson sighed deeply, but never a word, and the young man presently presumed. Here is another lesson to say nothing, said he. I'm ashamed of my long tongue. Let us make a bargain never to refer to this again. With all my heart, said the lawyer. I shake hands on that, Richard. Search for Mr. Hyde. That evening, Mr. Hudson came home to his bachelor house in sombre spirits and sat down to dinner without relish. It was his custom on a Sunday, when the meal was over, to sit close by the fire, a volume of some dry divinatory on his reading desk, until the clock of his neighbouring church rang out the hour 12, when he would go sombrely and gratefully to bed. On this night, however, as soon as the cloth was taken away, he took up a candle and went into his business room. There he opened his safe, took from the most private part of a document endorsed on the envelope as Dr. Jekyll's will, and sat down with a clouded brow to study its content. This will was to holograph for Mr. Utterson, though he took charge of it now that it was made, and had refused to lend the least assistance in the making of it, provided not only that in case of its disease of Henry Jekyll, MD, DCI, LLD, FRS, etc., all his possessions were to pass into the hands of his friend and benefactor, Edward Hyde, but that in case Dr. Jekyll's disappearance or unexplained absence for a period of exceeding 3 calendar months, the said Edward Hyde should step into the said Henry Jekyll's shoes without further delay, and free from any further burden or obligation beyond the payment of a few small sums to the members of the doctor's household. This document had long been the lawyer's eyesore. It offended him both as a lawyer and as a lover of the sane and customary sides of life, to whom the fictional was the immodest. And hitherto it was the ignorance of Mr. Hyde that had swelled his indignation now. By a sudden turn, it was his knowledge. It was already bad enough when the name was but a name which he could lean no more. It was more than when it began to be clothed upon the detestable attributors and eye of the shifting insubstantial mists that had long baffled his eye. There leaped into the sudden definitive payment of a friend. I thought it was madness, he said, as he replaced the obnoxious paper on the safe, and now I begin to fear it. Its disgrace. When that he blew out the candle, put on a greatcoat, and set forth in the direction of Cavendish Square, that citadel of medicine, where his friend, the great Dr. Lanton, had his house and received the crowding patients. If anyone knows, it will be Lanton, he had thought. The solemn butler knew and welcomed him. He was subjected to no stage of delay, but ushered direct from the door. to the dining room where Dr. Lanton sat alone over his wine. This was hearty, healthy, dapper, red-faced. This was a hearty, healthy, dapper, red-faced gentleman, with a shock of hair permanently white, with a boisterous and decided manner. At the sight of Addison, he sprang up from his chair and welcomed him with both hands. The gentry, as was the way of the man, was somewhat theatrical to the eye, but it reposited on genuine feeling, for these were two old friends, old mates, both at school and college, both thorough respecters of themselves and of each other, and what does not always follow man who thoroughly enjoyed each other's company. After a little rambling talk, the lawyer led up to the subject which so disagreeably preoccupied his mind. "I suppose, Lanton," said he, "you and I must have the same two oldest friends that Henry Jekyll has." "I wish the friends were younger," chuckled Dr. Layton, "but I suppose we are. And what of that? I see little of him now." "Indeed," said Addison. "I thought you had a bond of common interests." "We had," was the reply, "but it's more than 10 years since Henry Jekyll became too fanciful for me. It began to go wrong in the mind, and though of course I continue to take interest in him for old sake's sake, as they say, I see and I have seen devilish little of that man. Such unscientific balderdash," said the doctor, flushing suddenly purple, would have estranged Damon and Pythias. This little spirit of temper was somewhat of a relief to Mr. Utterson. They have only differed on some point of science. He thought that being of a man of no scientific passions, except in the matter of conversing. He even added, "It is nothing worse than that." He gave a friend a few seconds, his recomposure. He then approached the question he had come to put. "Did you ever come across a prodigy of his? One Hyde?" he asked. And Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde will continue on Tuesday. The reason I say Tuesday is because I'm working next Friday, and I'm off Monday and Tuesday instead of Thursday and Friday because I've got a doctor's appointment. But anyway, thank you very much for watching part 2 of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I hope you're enjoying it. I noticed I only got one view on that, and I do apologise if it's not what anyone was expecting. But hopefully, over time, you will all get used to me being back on doing this, and I'll review again like I said I would. Thank you very much for watching. I shall see you next Tuesday. Hopefully I'll be better luck at doing my top 10 or whatever I decide to talk about. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. Bye bye for now. Come on.